Hello and welcome to The Urbanist, Monocle's programme all about the built environment. I'm your host, Andrew Tuck. Coming up.
There's always this legend of Luis Barragán, of this poetic architect, that seems like, I don't know, he see a tree, he cries, and it's not like that.
We explore some iconic features of the built environment. From Mexico's most celebrated architect and his breathtaking buildings in the country's capital, to London's most recognisable silhouette that is celebrating 25 years in operation, and a look at one of Stockholm's soon-to-be icons too. That's all ahead in the next 30 minutes, right here on The Urbanist, with me, Andrew Tuck. We begin the episode in Mexico to explore the visionary works of Luis Barragán, the only Mexican architect to win the Pritzker Prize. From a hidden convent chapel that transforms sunlight into religious rituals, to a stable ranch about to become one of Mexico City's most exciting new cultural centres, Verity de Cala spoke to the architects and nuns keeping Barragán's legacy alive to explore what made his work so iconic and how his ideas continue to shape the city and global architecture.
For many, the Capuchin Chapel is Barragán's greatest example of his unique ability to merge spirituality with architectural form. So where better place to start? In Tlalpan, south of Mexico City, myself along with a small group of keen tourists wait outside a plain stucco wall on a quaint cobbled street. Unassuming facades are typical of Barragán's work, and nothing really hints that one of his most seminal works sits just behind. At 10 a.m. sharp, one of the chapel's nuns opens the doors, holds out a basket to place our phones in, and we enter into the courtyard. No recordings or photos are allowed, not even audio. In the patio, purple bougainvilleas tumbled down the walls, and a black stone fountain reflected the sky. Alongside the fountain, a cement lattice wall painted yellow threw a pattern of rays on the inner corridor. Already the light and reflections gave the place a sense of serenity. As the nuns took us through to the main chapel, she explained that it was consecrated in 1960, after 7 years of planning and building. Barragán was deeply religious, and much of his work was inspired by the stillness and the iconography of the iglesias in Mexico. This is the reason Barragán paid for the project, only asking that the sisters make food for the labourers. She said some of the nuns who were there then still live in the chapel now. In the chapel, natural but softened yellow light entered from the back through a concrete lattice wall painted yellow, casting sun-like rays across the room. A stronger light came in through a golden stained glass window, designed by sculptor Matías Goeritz. This light source, hidden from view, illuminated the large wooden cross from the side, projecting a 10-metre shadow of its form on the altar. As we gathered around again, the sister described how the compound was built in such a slant that it allowed the sunlight to reflect on specific areas at specific times. The altar, for example, is most bright in the early hours of the day, lighting up the room golden and timed perfectly to the routine of the sisters' religious activities. I wanted to understand more about how Barragán was able to create such a strong sense of atmosphere, creating emotional reactions to his work.
So there's always this legend of Luis Barragán, of this poetic architect, that seems like, I don't know, he see a tree, he cries, and it's not like that.
I went to speak to architect and son of the owner of Barragán's final design, Martin Luque, at Casa Gilardi. He took me around the house and showed me some of the ways Barragán creates these different responses and how he influenced the architecture of inner city houses. We started in the entrance hall, which opens up to the main living space, featuring an indoor pool and brightly coloured walls that seem suspended over the water.
When you enter to the space, you don't know why you want to go to the other space. But in terms of design and architecture, what he's doing is that he's seducing you because of light. The point where we're standing is darker. If you walk into that other space, the saturation of light is going to be different. It's going to be more saturated. This yellow spectrum really grows on your side. But then, again, you are stopped by another pair of doors. So when this is closed, what happens is that you have no idea what is next. So you can see the pace, the cadence of how he is really taking to the space. You are contained. So when your site is fully prepared with this yellow spectrum, the next space is going to punch you in the face with color. That's what happens.
It literally punches you in the face.
There's an emotional reaction of people every time, and they don't know why. Because Luis Barragán forced you to feel first than thinking. That's difficult in architecture. So when you enter to the space, you see light, you see color, but you don't see windows. You don't see what you are supposed to see in a normal situation. Everything is a volume. But because of the section, he's hiding the windows from the visual perspectives or points. And he's forcing you to come all the way around and finding the tree in a frontal position. So this is what he's presenting you at the end. And when you go out on the patio, what you find is the presence of the tree with the shadows, with the flowers on the floor, and the movement of air on the leaves, and the high walls they are framing the sky.
Growing up in Guadalajara, Barragán was influenced by Moorish, rural nature and colonial architecture. He was not trained as an architect, but as a civil engineer, and spent some of his early career learning how to create functional and rational buildings. It was between the years of 1946 to 1978 that his most famous and more poetic work was created. And it was at the end of this period that Casa Gilardi was built. But how did Barragán's style evolve to what we see in Casa Gilardi and the work of that period?
So he was very clear about his practice. There is no manifesto, there is no theory behind. It's just a personal synthesis. But if there are three key elements in his mindset, they would be a very fine collection of books about human thinking, poetry, philosophy, sociology, art, religion, some of it architecture, but more focused to ancient architecture or popular architecture. That would be one point. The second point would be traveling a lot, learning by experiencing different contexts or environments, popular knowledge. And the third point would be to gather with the most important intellectual people of his time. This is how he built his universe.
Barragán's inner circle of influences included Mexican artist and antiques collector Chucho Reyes, Matias Cortes, sculptor and painter, dancer and choreographer Rosa Rolanda, among many, many others.
And Luis Barragán was very good at the most difficult thing, to do a synthesis, to be careful enough for paying attention to someone else's ideas, but make them your own. That's the hardest part of it. It seems like he had a pact with angels and muses, and that it was about grabbing a pencil and there you go, you have the house. It's not like that. Luis Barragán was a very hard-working person, very sensitive, but being sensitive is not enough. You need to read, you need to think, you need to save money for traveling, you need to save money for being on the right place at the right time, experimenting everything, talking with everyone. His design process was very interesting in terms of redoing and redoing and polishing and redefining or refining things. Luis Barragán was a very clever business guy, a urbanist, developer, gardener, designer, architecture designer, interior designer.
My final stop on this tour was to meet architect Fernando Romero to discuss his plans to turn La Cuadra, Barragán's modernist ranch, finished in 1968, into a large cultural centre, opening in October this year. We met at one of the houses Fernando is currently working on in Mexico City's leafy Las Lomas neighborhood.
This house was designed in the late stage of his career, but this was a project that he completely already thought in color, the pink walls, the pink wood identity, that in a way connects with the experiences of his childhood when he has been teenager's time. He was spending time in the haciendas, and the haciendas, the old traditional buildings in the surroundings of Mexico. And I think Barragán showed in Cuadras that he have achieved a level of mastery in terms of proportions and sizes and composition, right? It's a very special courtyard that I put it in the level of Brunelleschi or some of the most brilliant architects in the history of Renaissance architecture, because the proportions are simply sublimely perfect. And well, we have acquired the property with the idea of having a master plan where we will develop a site where, because there's adjacent free plot around the property, you can also build other pavilions with other great architects. So it's going to be transformed in a foundation where we are also building a collection on site. So we will start a program of artist residences this year we will open an exhibition in the existing White House designed by Barragán, where we will showcase an exhibition of maquettes that has been designed by Jorge Covarrubias, and it's the first exhibition in Mexico dedicated fully to understand and experience and review the history of designs of Luis Barragán during his life through maquettes. It's the first permanent exhibition in Mexico dedicated to celebrate the evolution of the works of Luis Barragán and expand on the relationship between art and architecture. No?
And you've worked on like some major projects throughout Mexico, obviously. Sumaya is one of the big ones, the international airport. Why you're drawn to Barragán's work?
I think Barragán is more like a hero for us, no? Like somebody that has practiced in a completely different time. I think for me the inspiration is the capacity of Barragán to connect the local moment with the international style. He was able to kind of put together the international movement with the traditions in a mixer. He would become always a kind of beautiful reference for us of the potential of how through exploration you can achieve something of greatness through design.
What do you want people to take away from visiting La Cuadra in the long term? Like when they go there, what do you want them to kind of leave thinking?
Well, from the past, the last 30 years, the property has been visited only the courtyard. But from now on, it's not only that experience, but also to have the educational opportunity to learn more about the evolution of that precise architect. And also, we will have then artists living on the property doing the collection, so you will have the opportunity to interact with young artists that are going to be on site producing their artworks. So we thought that that will elevate the experience of the visit, will enable the visitors to also experience contemporary art, and I think that will be like an important asset that none other Barragán site will have, right? You went to Capuchinas?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
It is absolutely incredible.
I would love to go back. It's a masterpiece. Now we're in a conversation with a priest to try to find a site to donate the chapel also. So I want to do the same. This is a cardinal who was running the Catholic Church for 30 years, here with the Pope Benedict. He's searching a site, ideally in the city. So there's so many places where you will need to build or increase the quality of their temples, no? But we still are waiting.
Let me know when you do.
Yeah, we'll love.
Fernando's plans to create a religious site inspired by the Chapel Capuchin is just one way Barragán's many works have had and will have a profound impact on the city's landscapes and architecture. His designs like Casa Gilardi redefined urban living, proving that even in a dense metropolis, quiet courtyards and sculptured light could carve out some serenity. Many students take a pilgrimage to Mexico City to study and be inspired, and his influence lingers in the projects of Mexico's most influential architects and landscape designers. Tatiana Bilbao's social housing borrows from his play of shadow, while Mario Shetnin's redesigns of the city parks echoes Barragán's belief that nature and the city's unique geodiversity must be woven into architecture. Barragán's designs remain a compass for how to build cities and homes that don't just function, but are filled with emotion as well.
Next up, to Stockholm, where a new development called Hästen 21 is hoping to become a renowned feature of the Swedish capital. Pembroke, alongside retail specialists, the retail headquarters and SHL architects, are currently working to transform the site into a more accessible and attractive place to live, work, shop and socialise. While we were in Cannes in March for the real estate trade show MIPIM, Monocle's Carlotta Rebello discussed the development with Pembroke's Senior Regional Director of Nordics, Kristen Willestrom, and Senior Vice President and Head of Europe, Matthew Knight, as well as Håkan Persson, CEO of the retail headquarters. Carlotta began by asking Kristen to describe the vision behind this new project.
This is a truly iconic landmark that we're creating in the city centre, the heart of Stockholm. It's a mixed-use development, 36,000 square meters in total, delivering fantastic retail, office and residential in the heart of Stockholm. We've been active in the Nordics since 2008, and we own 3 assets in this center block in Stockholm, and we had a very long-term vision in transforming this, opening it up, creating new passageways, etc., through this block, because that's how it used to be. And then it was built in, and these passageways disappeared. So it's really, bringing back the history of this block.
It's interesting that you mentioned there the passageways, because I know that walkability in the district and pedestrianization is a really important element of the project. Is that part of the, narrative to help it be a destination at all times and not just during retail hours?
Yes, of course. And I think, a curated mix as well between residential, retail and offices really create that vibrant mix and keep the activation live for 24/7. And I think, we often talk about the lives between the buildings, and this is really helping us to create that destination to Stockholm. Part of this is also creating a space for the person to linger around, to come back and to visit, for the workers or the people that live in Stockholm or tourists coming. So it's very important for us to create this fantastic landscaping around it.
I wanted to bring you in here because a significant part of the project is the luxury retail that goes in it. And I was really curious when I was reading about Hästen 21, because Stockholm, historically is a strong city economically. Why has it struggled to attract luxury brands? Why is the luxury sector one that's a bit trickier to break through?
No, but it's a very concentrated city and city center. If we're looking at Stockholm compared to the other Nordic cities, we are as big as Copenhagen and Oslo together. And in Stockholm we have 15 luxury brands, mono brands, Oslo 15 and Copenhagen 21. In Oslo and Copenhagen they're quite recent, added on more luxury retail. But we have been very fortunate in Stockholm. We have had a very low vacancy rate in the city. And this is a great quality and very unique to create a project with more density in a location like this. It is already an established location. So we are adding on more quality space, and that is what retailers are after, because they have been looking for new locations to expand. They haven't been found because there has not been any vacant areas, because it's a very small stretch of luxury today, and the stretch between all these blocks is not that long, and we have the highest retail density and retail turnover in this area already. So it's very nice to add this on. There is a pocket in the market.
Matti, to bring you in here, we were just hearing about, the importance as well of bringing in lessons from other sectors, other markets. I know that in the case here of Pembroke's involvement, the scheme in Maximilianhof in Munich kind of informed as well some of the insights into this one. Maybe talk to me a bit about some of those shared design principles that were deployed here to help make this project a success.
I think it goes further than just Maxi. Maxi certainly has a presence with the luxury retailers, but we also have that in a project or an asset in Melbourne in Australia as well, which I was part of the refurbishment of. And I think from our global presence and our international real estate, we understand what retailers need. And so to be able to create an architectural building that sits really nicely at the ground plane with really high floor-to-ceiling heights, like, sort of 5 metre-ish heights, which isn't available in Stockholm generally. And part of the drive for that was the learning of what retailers wanted that we're seeing from our other assets around the world. So we were able to establish that, and that not only is there high floor-to-ceiling glazing on the ground floor, there's the opportunity for a second floor brand presence for a retailer, which doesn't exist necessarily in Stockholm, and also, we struggle with it in Maxi and also in Melbourne. So this was an opportunity that was born out of that.
What are some of the other, specific design elements that these retail spaces want to be best in class? Some of the ones that came up during the planning that you could share with us?
Part of it's the environmental performance of the building. The flexibility also in terms of the way that the tenant can fit out its space and the usage of that space. With a bigger floor plate and a bigger expanse without columns and other areas to impede on the fit out, there are a couple of things that we brought in. And hopefully, from an environmental point of view, high performance glazing and low energy usage will be good for overhead costs for these tenants to operate out of there.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned the environmental side there, because, this idea of setting new standards when it comes to environmentally responsible luxury retail is really important, particularly when we are talking about a development that we want to have life after retail hours. What are some of the strategies deployed here to ensure that it is indeed a sustainable project?
We've really focused on creating a curated mix that brings that to Stockholm, that keeps the activation live for more than the office hours. But I also think that we can really help luxury retailers to also reduce their carbon footprint in terms of how we operate the building and what we provide in the surrounding areas to create a place for the person rather than a place to transact.
I think to add to that, we've got geothermal and the building is connected to district heating network. So it's tapping into all the good sustainability that Stockholm as a city and Sweden as a country already adopt. So we're building on that legacy of what they've already started.
We are where the flow is. So, we have both daytime and nighttime population, which is quite unique too. So, Stockholm is a very nice city. It's a walkable city and we have a very tight core area. So, and of course, public transport, everything makes this very reachable, not only for the one living in the city.
Not saying that Stockholm isn't, but this is part of an ambition to make this even a more dynamic and international city. I guess I'm really curious to hear from your perspective, what are your hopes that this project can do to unlock that, to help bring that international dynamism, to bring in high-paying customers alongside the luxury retail brands?
It's clear from the office parts of this development, we pre-lease those 2 years before completion. We see a high demand for international grade A standard. And then we're talking about generous floor-to-ceiling height, fantastic daylight for the various floors and indoor climate. We're also providing a roof garden, etc. So there are lots of USPs of this that will bring an addition to the heritage buildings that we currently see in Stockholm. And this location also, we're opening it up. It used to be more of a closed front, and now we're opening it up and making the connections to the street level to create a more vibrant destination.
Yeah, and the neighboring project, Mästerhuset, we were setting a new standard with that one, and that came out very well. So this is, let's say, the second phase of it, more or less.
Of course, we know that Scandinavian design tends to be quite minimalist. We're talking as well here about, as you just mentioned, to try to honor the heritage of the area. How was that juxtaposition of the minimalist design, the demands of the luxury retailers, and the heritage that you have to honor? Were there some compromises you had to make? At the end of the day, did the Scandinavian design influence the end result? Talk to me about that a bit.
We've got SHL as our architects, and they are embedded in the Nordic region. They know what is right for the Nordics. And I think we didn't have to miss out on anything. We wanted a building that was rich in its fine-grained nature, very detailed, architecturally considerate of its neighbours. And in doing that, we were able to provide this building that presents as a really long-term jewel, if you like, that people hopefully will look at in 50 years' time and go, oh, they built it like they used to. So that, I think, inspires those tenants to come. They are looking for the heritage nature. Yes, they want the glazing, they want the presence to the street, but they also want the richness and the depth that this building brings with its stone facade and the detailing that changes as it goes up through its register. So I think we didn't face any huge challenges that we had to step away from our ambitions. It was complementary in so many ways to the existing fabric of the city.
Christian Willerstrom, Matthew Knight and Håkan Persson there, speaking with Carlotta Rebello. Since the turn of the millennium, London's skyline has featured an unmistakable circular shape, which today rivals the silhouettes of St Paul's Cathedral and Big Ben for the title of the most discernible symbol of the city. The London Eye celebrates its 25th birthday this year, and recently journalist Georgia Scaturo took a ride on the internationally renowned observation wheel with one of its designers, Julia Barfield from Marks Barfield's Architects. They discussed the Eye's inception, construction and the impact it's had on the city.
And here we are on the London Eye 25 years later. I just want to start from that moment when your partner and husband, David Marks, had the idea. And what made you and David think that a giant wheel would be the right project to celebrate the millennium?
Well, it all started actually more than 25 years ago in 1993, and there was a competition in the Sunday Times, organised by the Sunday Times and the Architecture Foundation, calling for ideas to celebrate the millennium, and it called for a landmark. And so we were discussing it, and we decided that it shouldn't be just something that you look at, it should be something that people could participate in, that was celebratory. Actually, David came up with the idea for the wheel while walking to work one day, with seeing long views in two directions and thinking that, London had nowhere where you could go up high to see it from a height, like, Paris has the Eiffel Tower, and at that time, the only way to get up high was to climb up all those steps, 360 steps, to the top of St. Paul's. I mean, we were two young architects who had just set up in practice, but we didn't win the competition. In fact, nobody won the competition. The judges didn't think any of the ideas were good enough, but we did. And so we started a company called the Millennium Wheel Company, and we decided to put in for planning application, actually on this site. We had fairly rudimentary information, but we thought we would go for it. And then when we were talking about it in our kitchen in Stockwell, I said the only place we can put this really is right in the centre of London, just about here on the South Bank. And if we're building a big structure, we were mindful, even in those days, that putting it by the river was actually a good idea, so that you could bring pieces up the river in order to construct it.
And what's best location? As we speak, we say hello eye to eye with the Big Ben, another iconic landmark.
Absolutely.
In London. What was the concept of the London Eye?
It was all about celebrating London, really. But the wheel seemed like a really good way to do that, because it was also could be a symbol of time passing because of the millennium. First, we put 60 capsules around the wheel, to symbolise, 60 minutes, 60 seconds. But eventually, as we developed the project, we decided that A, that would be too expensive, and B, you'd be seeing the capsule next door instead of looking at the 360-degree views, which is what the whole project's about. So we reduced the number of capsules to 32.
It's been called the beating heart of the London sky, and yet, if you look at it, it reminds you of a bicycle wheel.
Yes, a circle, it has no beginning and no end. It's a very powerful symbol of regeneration, of renewal, cycles of life. It's also a very powerful symbol for the circular economy. We never wanted it to be a structure that was dominant. We're always aiming that it should be light in feeling.
And inside these capsules, time is very slow. These breathtaking views of London charm the tourists, but it also relax and calm the hectic Londoners as well. How did you achieve this?
The idea was always that the capsule should be on the outside. So this was really stepping the wheel apart from maybe a traditional Ferris wheel where you have hanging capsules. And that was always the idea, that when you got to the top, it should be like being on top of a mountain in the middle of the city, that you would have these 360-degree views. But there is something about long views that is very good for the soul, I think. The kind of mentally to be able to see long distances, it really does calm the soul and uplifts it at the same time, which I think is the kind of winning formula, really.
In your mind, what is the London Eye doing to us all? Either inside a pod, or actually you can see it from everywhere in central London. What is it that it does to us?
Well, I think looking out from the pod, it's wanting to make sense of the city from a distance. I mean, it's a bit like when they went to the moon. One of the most important things about going to the moon was actually looking back at the Earth and seeing how precious and vulnerable it was and how beautiful. And I suppose this is, in a small way, a bit like that, going up high and seeing, that London is a very beautiful city.
Yes, and the dome of St. Paul is right on our right-hand side, being totally the centre of this postcard. Let's go back to how did you construct something that is so big and so heavy, despite looking so slim and light? To build something of this weight on the river, what challenge was it?
Well, the main challenge was how we were going to construct it. We actually found Hollandia. They had the idea that the best way to do it was to build it horizontal in the river and then raise it as a single piece. We were lucky because the river's very wide and the navigation channel is on the other side at this point, because at this point the river is north-south. it actually turns a corner. That's how we built it. There was 4 main pieces for the rim that were built in Holland by Hollandia and brought across the water and up the Thames through Tower Bridge, which opened for the first one, to welcome it. It was a bit of kind of theatre, which was nice. And in fact, the whole raising of the wheel was a huge feat. It was the biggest and heaviest structure, they think, that had ever been raised like this. And in fact, the first attempt to raise it was not successful. One of the temporary cables that was attaching the centre of the wheel to the rim came out as it was being tested beyond, 120%. And then that kind of detail had to be redesigned. But then eventually we did rise it from the centre like that.
Was that stressful?
It was very stressful. That particular moment was very stressful. BA, who were our sponsors, they had invited the world's press. So it was quite a public. But I think what that did was that it made people realise what an engineering feat this was. It wasn't something that was easy. It was actually really difficult. It was very much about creative problem solving and working as a team.
And you can have a sense of all the creative problems that you might have looking at this intricate set of cables that are holding the whole wheel. What are the most interesting facts that you are most excited to share with us?
At that time, in 1994 or 95, when we were putting in for the original planning application, the South Bank was really deserted. There was this figure that we found out about, which was 1.5 million people used to go halfway across Westminster Bridge, take a picture of the Houses of Parliament and then go back north. The South Bank was an area that needed regeneration. And in fact, it's become London's Paseo. It's one of the nicest places to walk in London by the river.
And it's attracting 85 million visitors since its opening on the 9th of March 2000. It's an achievement. Are you quite proud?
Yes, I'm very proud. I mean, 85 million people can't be wrong.
We've almost completed our 30 minutes ride, but what lesson has this been for you for the next 25 years?
We do need to focus on architecture that is much less damaging to the environment, low carbon, using biomaterials, and doing more refurbishment as opposed to new build. That's what we're focusing on. And we've also got a project we're focusing on as a tidal lagoon to produce tidal energy in the Severn Estuary. So that's one that I'm very keen to do. We're kind of taking that as our kind of next big entrepreneurial project, is to produce renewable energy. Could be the biggest renewable energy project in the UK.
My thanks to Giorgia Scaturo for that report. And that's all for this week's episode of The Urbanist. You can follow us for new editions of the show every week, and you can subscribe to Monocle magazine for reports on all things design, architecture and urbanism too. Just visit monocle.com. The Urbanist is produced by Carlotta Ribello and by David Stevens, who also edits the show. I'm Andrew Tuck. Goodbye, and thank you for listening, City Lovers.